This week's episode of Knitting Vicariously is brought to you by the letters G and T, somewhat inevitably, the number 2, the number of FOs I've finished this year to date, and by the colours light blue and gold, because I'm horribly predictable. Hello Pickles, and welcome to episode 19 of the Knitting Vicariously podcast. My name is Caroline. I'm found more commonly across Instagram and Ravelry as DUNDERKNIT. I'm a knitter living in London, and if this is your first time joining us here in the podcast, a massive hello and welcome to you. A very quick word of warning to say that this is a swearing-friendly podcast, and therefore there is cursing, there is general tomfoolery with language, and if you're not a fan of the potty-mouthed vocabulary, this probably isn't going to be the podcast for you, but thank you so much for checking us out anyway. For those of you who've been around for a while, a big hello and welcome back. I hope you're all tremendously well. We're already into mid-March. The year, it is flying by. It's just a matter of days now until I head up to EYF, to Edinburgh later on this week. I'll be heading up on Wednesday the 20th, and we'll touch on that more in a second. But in the meantime, yeah, it's crazy. It's looking deceptively like it's very spring-like outside, and that has me feeling some very kind of spring-like changes. US folks in Northern America, I know that your clocks have already gone forward. We're a couple of weeks behind you, so ours don't go forward until the end of this month, but still, it's definitely a bit springy at the moment. Eagle-eyed, long-term, or indeed just slightly nosy viewers, love you, may well have noticed that I've been bringing these spring-like changes in to more than just my wardrobe and general attire choice, but also to my hair. Yes, I made a bit of a conscious choice that I wanted to lighten things up a little bit for spring. My hairdresser seems to have taken me very much at my word and gone a little bit out of my comfort zone in that sense. This is definitely the strawberry blondest I have been since I was a very tiny child. But you know, I'm trying to come to grips with it. I'm trying to come to terms with it. I've been quite dark auburn for quite a long time. My natural hair colour started out this light when I was very little and gradually got darker and darker through to kind of auburn, verging on dangerously close to being brunette, hence why we started to make some changes, because, you know, you don't go through the rigmarole and the just shit talking of being a teenager with bright red hair in Scotland to get to your 30s and, as we've established, decide that you're comfortable owning it only to find people think you are a brunette. This is very disturbing. So yeah, we've definitely tried to buck that to buck that assumption. She also went mad with the curls because my hair is poker straight naturally, and so all hairdressers take this as a challenge, a personal challenge to themselves to make my hair curly, and to her credit, she has done that. She's done it with a metric fuck ton of hairspray, which, you know, I'm still slightly concerned about standing too close to naked flames, but you know, we're working it. It's yeah, there are some very blonde bits in here that I'm just still coming to terms with. I may end up toning it down slightly, going a little bit more back towards the kind of copper auburny shade in time, but for the moment, people keep telling me it's very spring-like. Thank you so much if you're one of the 3 people I reached out to yesterday saying, what the fucking hell has happened to my hair? Hannah of the Corner of Craft, I know you're one of them because you are very well versed in changing hair colours, and I therefore trust you and your wisdom implicitly. You are a marvel, you talk me off the ledge, I very much appreciate it. But yeah, enough about my crazy hair and the fact that it's a little bit blonder. I'm learning to get on with it for now, at least, so we shall see. We'll be coming back to the subject of my hair colour a little bit later on, because let's just say it's all been very front of mind at the moment in ways which are both comedic and deeply troubling if you're me. Apparently I just don't have that much imagination, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, in the meantime, I wanted to say a massive thank you again and issue a slight apology to everyone who put up with the technical difficulties on my previous episode, on episode 18. For some reason, the YouTube gremlins were very much out to get me the day that I uploaded that podcast, and so in spite of, I think, a good few of you being able to see it on the day that it was posted or the day just after, for some reason at a certain point it just stopped working. It fell over. There were a few different things I was trying with it, and in the end I had to delete it and re-upload it. So to those of you who went back, who watched it, who re-added your comments or who hit the thumbs up button again, thank you so much for that. You genuinely didn't have to. I really appreciate the fact that you did. We lost a few views on it, but it really doesn't make a difference to me whatsoever, and so I appreciated you so much for engaging that way and going truly above and beyond. Thank you too for everyone who issued some lovely comments about our vlog footage from Unravel, both myself and Hannah of the Corner of Craft, who I will of course link in the description box below. We had such a fun weekend, both spending time together, meeting folks when we were out and about, and then just a good old giggle filming that section of the podcast towards the end where we shared our yarny wares. It was a really, really fun weekend. I'm looking forward to catching up with Hannah and many, many more at EYF later on this week. And to that point, yes, it's so very nearly upon us. If you're not attending EYF, fear not, I will have a little bit more news for you about our giveaway in a second. But if you are, as I've mentioned previously, I would be absolutely delighted to say hello to you in person. I will be around the festival during the days. I'll be there on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I don't have a ticket for the Sunday event, unfortunately, nor do I have tickets for any of the evening events, but I will certainly be around the festival during the daytime. If you do happen to follow me over on Instagram, and I am DUNDERKNIT over on Instagram, I would recommend, if you want to perhaps find me at EYF or know what I'm up to, that's probably where I'm going to be keeping folks the most up to date. I know that signal reception in a very, very busy festival venue is sometimes a little bit problematic, but hopefully I should be able to give you a little bit of a steer of roughly kind of when I'll be around, and if in doubt, do feel free to pop a comment over there and we'll see if we can meet up. I can't promise, obviously, that I'll be able to say hello to all of you, but at the very least I should be able to sort of flag where I am roughly at different points of the day, and hopefully our paths will cross from there. But to those of you who aren't able to attend, as I mentioned last time, I want to ensure that we're bringing a little bit of vicarious EYF joy to you. And so, as I did with Rhinebeck towards the end of last year, I'll be putting together a few goodies, picking up a few things from some fabulous and choice vendors that we've got at EYF, and putting together a giveaway bundle for you. So I don't know what it's going to be just yet. I've got a few ideas of people I know I want to go and stop in and speak to, but I'll be sharing some of those snippets of those things and the package itself once I get back. And so I have posted a new thread over in the Ravelry group, the link for which will be in the description box below. And so if you want to head on over to that thread, again, this is primarily for people who are not going to be attending EYF in person. There is a prompt in there which is essentially describe your perfect yarny day. It doesn't have to be at a festival if festivals aren't your bag, but ultimately I would love to hear that, and one post per person, and as before I will choose a random number post to win the giveaway. I am intending to film a little bit of vlog footage while I'm out and about in Edinburgh, and so as with episode 18, I may well, once I come back in 2 weeks time from now, do a bit of a sort of hybrid episode. I may end up doing an entire vlog episode and then kind of see where I get to in terms of timings. Not totally sure how that's going to work, but essentially there will be me talking and there will be some EYF vlog footage, and at some point the two shall meet. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. I think that's about it for admin up front, so let's get into the podcast proper. As ever, you'll find show notes for everything I talk about in this week's episode in the description box below, so the description box immediately below this video if you're watching this over on YouTube. There is a little down arrow, it'll expand out and show you the full list there. Alternatively, you can pop over to Ravelry, where we have a group, which is the Knitting Vicariously podcast group. You can find us by searching for Knitting Vicariously in the Groups tab. And once you're in there, you'll find episode-specific threads, including the show notes for everything I talk about this week. You will also be able to find us over on Instagram, where if you follow the Knitting Vicariously Instagram account, not my personal account, the account specifically for the podcast itself, I include new posts for each episode that include Instagram usernames and any relevant hashtags to the things that I've talked about. So you have a myriad of ways in which to stalk all of the fun things that we discuss today. And so with that, let's get into it. As you will know, the very first thing I usually talk about is what it is that I'm wearing. And let me just confess to you that my sweater collection is getting thin on the ground. I think I'm down to maybe the last 3, so I need to up the production essentially, because we're getting a bit light on this. That being said, I've tried to time it so that my lighter weight sweaters are coming to bear in the months which dictate the wearing of lighter weight sweaters. And so the sweater that I have to share with you this week is the featherweight cardigan. This is a pattern by Hannah Fettig. I'll put it up here on the screen so you can see the version that is on the designer's page. This is a cardigan that has been knit by so many people. You will have seen this, I'm sure, on pretty much every other long-standing podcast that's out there. Not every other, mine is not long-standing. On most other knitting podcasts, shall we say. It is a very simple, straightforward raglan cardigan. Let me stand up and I'll give you the full demonstration. And here we have the... Now, I was going to say featherweight boobies. That feels wrong on a number of levels, especially with this hand climb. No one needs that. Anyway, let's move on. As you can see, this is a lightweight cardigan. It has 3/4 length sleeves. It is, I wouldn't call it cropped. For me, it does sit kind of nicely on the mid-hip length. And yeah, you can finish it off with pretty much any ribbing that you so choose. I decided to be a glutton for punishment and finish it off with twisted rib. I will talk more about that momentarily. It is designed to sit open. It's not designed to have any kind of fastenings or anything, which is just as well. It is a style that I prefer of cardigans. I don't have many cardigans, but those that I do are all ones that are designed to sit open rather than closing at the front. And yeah, as you can see, it is a raglan cardigan. So you cast on here, it is a top-down cardigan. You cast on a very small number of stitches here at the front and then increase that out. Sorry, giant chin in your face. And now boobs. This is all going so well. But yeah, it is a really simple, straightforward cardigan. You will have seen it all over the place on other people's channels, I'm sure, who've knit it previously. And yeah, here it is. So as I mentioned, this is knit out of sock yarn. It's actually knit out of Hedgehog Fibres sock yarn. They're 90-10 merino nylon sock yarn in the Monet colourway, and it's really pretty. It has these beautiful speckles. Let me hold an arm up so you can see. It has these beautiful speckles the whole way along it, from pinks, from purples, from blues, and then the occasional little pop of orangey rust. It is delightful. And I will confess that I loved this colourway as soon as I saw it. I was not convinced that I'd be able to pull it off in a garment. I'm still not entirely convinced that I can, but at the same time, you know, this is a great pattern for pulling off the sock yarn colourways that you just think, I really love this. I want this to work. I'm going to try it and see how we go. It's definitely very, very useful for doing that. As I mentioned, it is a top-down cardigan. You start at the back of the neck, you increase out for the raglans on either side of the sleeve and obviously on the sleeve itself. You eventually get to the point where you then separate the sleeves and continue on down with the rest of the cardigan to knit the ribbing at the bottom and then pick up for the collar around the neckline and knit that inwards as well as the sleeves. So yeah, it's a fairly simple and straightforward construction. Really, really good first pattern for if you've never knit a sweater before. This is a great one to try. It does require quite a lot of purling because it is obviously knit flat, given it is a cardigan. But that being said, I actually didn't find it too bad with this. I think because it's an open cardigan, you're not knitting and purling quite so much to cover the full chest. It was, let me just check the size that I knit. I'm fairly certain I knit the size 42-inch bust, which again, my bust is a little bit larger than that, but an open cardigan is quite forgiving in that sense, and it means that it's fit me for the last few years. So I knit this back in 2016. I knit it for the Fibre East festival that I went to that year. I think I had a bit of a mission to make sure that I was wearing a new sweater for it. Of course, it ended up being like 27 degrees, ludicrously warm, and yet there was me trudging around wearing a cardigan. So, the joys of knitting festivals in the height of summer. That was really well thought through on my part. But yeah, I really do like it. As I mentioned, I was a glutton for punishment. I decided I wanted to finish it off with twisted rib, and I have twisted rib on the cuffs and the hem of the sweater itself, as well as the collar. And this was a labour of love, let me tell you. Now, it was not quite such a labour of love that I twisted the rib on both sides. So by that, what I mean is, if I shuffle over to you for a second, you'll be able to see that while the rib is twisted on this side of the knitting, on the inside, if I flip it, it is not twisted, and that's just to say that I was knitting through the back loop but not purling through the back loop, and that's what managed to keep me sane the whole way through this. So I think knitting and purling through the back loop is a lot, whereas with this, as I say, it was just a little bit easier to manage. So I was knitting through the back loop, purling one on the one side, and then just knit one, purl one on the other on the way back. So yeah, that helped to keep me a little bit more sane. Certainly for the sleeves themselves, that was a little bit easier because it was done on the round. That wasn't quite so bad, but where it was knit flat, yes, I couldn't have done the purl through the back loop all that way. And as if that weren't punishment enough, I decided to go truly above and beyond and finish off my hem here with a tubular bind off. Yes, I don't quite know what brand of crazy I was smoking that day, but if I hold this up, you might be able to see, maybe, that I've got a tubular bind off here, which was time consuming. I'm pretty sure I had to do it several times. I'm pretty sure I also advertised my general dissatisfaction with how long it was taking me over on Instagram, also several times. But you know, genuinely I'm quite happy that I did it, and I even got to the point of doing it on the sleeves for the cuffs as well. So it looks pretty good. It's lovely and stretchy. It meant I didn't need to worry about having to go back and cats. It meant that I didn't need to worry too much about having to go back and make sure that it wasn't going to kind of pull it all in after doing so much ribbing. But yeah, I'm genuinely fairly happy with this and how it came out. I will say it's not something I wear particularly often, and that is probably down to the fact that it is a speckled yarn, and there's really no way around that. I tend to wear things that are a little bit more kind of single coloured or block colours, and so this, it's a lovely kind of throw on and wander off to a yarn festival. I think I wore it again to Fibre East last year, funnily enough, when it was not 27 degrees and I wasn't dying. But yeah, it's a really lovely sweater to kind of throw on. It's just not one that I wear particularly often, and so while it was a lot of fun to make, and I really do enjoy the overall effect of it, it doesn't get a huge amount of wear from me, which is why, you know, it's great to bring it on the podcast and show it off a little bit, because otherwise this does have a tendency of being consigned to my wardrobe, and it deserves better than that. So there we go. So once again, I hate to say that I have absolutely no FOs to share with you this week. That being said, I am closing in, and so if we move straight along into what it is that I'm working on, I mean, content is thin on the ground for you this week, but I am trying my best to be very monogamous. So with that in mind, and with EYF in my sights, I have a project that you have seen for the last couple of weeks now. It is living again in my BETSYMAKES bag, which is one of my favourite sweater size bags. BETSYMAKES is a fabulous maker. She has the BETSYMAKES podcast as well, and she is Sam. She's here in the UK and has a fabulous Instagram account. She's got some gorgeous new bags. She's a hand dyer. She will of course be linked in the description box below. But in here is the project that I am spending so much time monogamously working on, to the extent that its impact is rather far-reaching, shall we say. We'll come back to that. But yes, in here I have my Zweig pullover, and it's not finished yet, but the end is in sight. So yes, it is sleeveless still, although I have got my needles in here for the first of the two sleeves, but the body is bound off. I have tried it on. It is good lengthwise. We are happy with the length. Just to be clear again, that this is a pattern by Caitlin Hunter. I'll put the picture up here on the screen on the off chance that you've missed everything that's ever happened in the knitting community in the last 2 years. You will have seen this sweater, if not least because it's been here for the last couple of weeks, but also because it's very, very, very well recognised by now, I am sure. So yeah, this is my version of it. I was holding it backwards, for which I apologise. But yeah, this is my Zweig. It is knit in Hey Sister Yarn Co. in their Geronimo sock base, which is an 80-20 sock base. It is 80% merino, 20% nylon, and it is in the colourways Can't Take the Sky From Me, which is this beautiful blue with some lovely, lovely purpley blue and lavendery speckles in there, as well as their fabulous gold colourway, which is Drizzle, and it's just one of my absolute favourites. I did knit the texture on the body of the sweater itself. Let me hold it up to the camera so that you can see. So you have all of these little crosses that are knit the whole way across the body of the sweater itself. I did actually post, just to mention, after doing these for a good, let's say 4 or 5 repeats, I finally figured out a way of doing it. So without wishing to give too much of the pattern itself away, they are little cable crosses, but because they're very narrow, there's a way that you can do them without actually having to necessarily kind of use a cable needle, or indeed cable without a cable needle. There's a way of doing it where you just twist the stitches themselves as you're working them. And it took me longer to work out than I would have liked, but it did make it much, much quicker for me when I did. So if you are interested, if you're knitting on Zweig, or if you're thinking that you might do, I did post a highlight of the way that I work those stitches over on Instagram. If you go into my personal account, which is DUNDERKNIT, you should see one of the circles immediately under my bio at the top will feature my my little highlight that's linked to that. So yes, so as I mentioned, I am still working on this. I have just, as in this morning, picked up the sleeve and started to work on there. I'm working it on my little 12-inch circulars, my Chowgoos. I love 12 and 16-inch circulars, even down to 9 inches for the cuffs around here where they fit quite neatly. They make it go so much faster for me. I'm not a magic looper, I'm not a DPNer. Both of those slow me down immeasurably, whereas my knitting style just allows me to zip around on these fairly swiftly, and I love them. They're not for everyone, I appreciate that, but this is how I prefer. And so they are just Chowgoo needles. The Chowgoo needles for the 12-inch ones in particular are great because they have a slight bend in the tips, if you can see that there. And if you do hear noises in the background, as I say, apologies. It has started hailing outside. Mine is not the most wind-tight house. There are some funny noises that you get in high wind. So if it sounds as though I'm trumping with wild abandon, I apologise for that. It is the ill-fitting windows because, you know, renting in London. Good move. Anywho, so yeah, they've got these sort of slightly bent needles that make it much easier again to knit in the small circumference. They're great. So I'm hoping that maybe, just maybe, I mean it won't be blocked because I'm not a magician, but I might end up wearing this at EYF at some point this week. It's probably going to have 3/4 length sleeves because again it's quite lightweight. It feels like a good fit for this jumper. If I'm really feeling committed, I may go full length, but my jury's out. So we shall see. But as I mentioned, in terms of sizing on this, I'm knitting the extra large, I think, which is the 48-inch chest, so it gives me a fair bit of good positive ease around it. I've tried it on, I'm pretty happy with how it's fitting. It only really remains for me to get this bugger done, but as I mentioned, this is having quite the impact on me. Now, it's been a while since I've knit something entirely monogamously, and it really is, so if I hold this up, you might be able to see there's a very slight, I don't know how well it's going to come across on the video here, there's a very slight kink just here, which is where I picked it up at the, just not long after I filmed the last episode, and I didn't work on it kind of monogamously then, until about the weekend after. So I film every 2 weeks, so in other words, last weekend when I picked this up was really kind of when I started to work on this in earnest, and from then I have managed to get the rest of the body done, which, considering I'm still working a full-time job, I'm still working a job that is perhaps even more than full-time, but which I'm enjoying, don't get me wrong, but yeah, it's been quite the endeavour. So I'm trying to bust this out as best I can. If I end up wearing it, great. If I don't, that is also fine. But yeah, its impact has been fairly wide-reaching. So you'll see in terms of the colour combination, it's an unusual one. The light blue with the speckles, it definitely kind of quite, you know, kind of stand out and a bit different. And then the gold and the sort of nice kind of bright tones that you get. Do you see what I've done here? Oh, it's either really funny or it's just really fucking predictable and unimaginative and deeply short-sighted. And essentially what I've done is I've said to myself, do you know what? I really like this colour combination. Let's make my hair the same colour. It's not far off. It's, if anything, this is more the colour that I was going for when I went into the hairdresser. Which I think makes it worse. So yeah, it's oh gosh, these curls are really doing weird things. Yeah, yeah, nothing if not predictable. That's me. And that's pretty much it for what I've been working on. As I mentioned, I have been doing this monogamously. I will say, so towards the bottom here, one thing I'm very proud of, as ever, is I've mentioned this bind off a few times. I'm going to hold it up here so you can see it. Let me do it at such a point where you can actually see it properly. So using at the bottom here the bind off that I have, which is delightfully stretchy and looks really lovely and neat. This is my preferred, my go-to, Laurie's Twisty bind off. It's a bind off that I've mentioned a few times now, and it's one that has worked very differently from anything else that I've seen. It works on any ribbing, so 1x1, 2x2, whatever it is that you happen to be working on, but the main piece behind it is that instead of adding kind of extra yarn overs or moving the yarn about the needle in any specific way, it's actually the needle itself that moves. So there are some fantastic YouTube videos that you can find by searching for Laurie's Twisty Bind Off. I might even remember to link them in the show notes below, but I would really recommend it as a bind off. I found that in the past when I was using things like Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off, it tended to flare quite badly for me. So in other words, that you'd have almost excess yarn in the bind off that would make it kind of flip out a little bit, whereas this one sits really nice and flat and is still perfectly stretchy. So big fan of this bind off, and would recommend you giving it a go if you're in the market for a new one. But yeah, the old the knitting content, it is thin on the ground this week because I have been very dedicated to getting this done. So dedicated indeed that oh, it's fed into my personal just sense of springtime style and direction, as if I have either of those things. But yeah, it's all fine. I am continuing to work on, or at least I will be taking the other two projects that I've shown previously here, which is my starting point shawl, which I'm looking to take with me up to Edinburgh for a little bit more kind of engaged knitting, and then also my Scotty sweater that I showed previously. That is the light blue drops sweater, because again, I give up. Apparently I'm just a secret, like, obsessive, and when I do things, I do them consistently and universally. Oh dear, it would be funnier if it weren't entirely accurate. But yeah, so there you go. That's apparently me. So, but on the subject of the Scotty sweater, as I mentioned, so when I had to remove the previous version of episode 18 and re-upload it, I saw that there were a couple of comments both on the original version and on the new version around the subject of drops. And so talking about the Scotty sweater, I just wanted to address that briefly here. So in particular, there were a couple of people who had mentioned the drops conversation, which is, just to bring you back up to speed, I had mentioned that there is a hashtag which is DropADrops, which was linked over on Instagram, where quite a few people had drawn attention to the fact that Drops pattern side of the organisation had been publishing some patterns that looked incredibly familiar, and indeed rather too close to comfort from a number of independent pattern designers. So in particular, there's a shawl or wrap that looks very like the Starting Point or the Fading Point shawls by Hohi. There is a sweater that looks incredibly similar to a Stephen West pattern, and a couple of other examples besides. And a few people had mentioned in the comments that they had some interesting kind of viewpoints, perspectives on that, and had challenged me or had questions around my own. And so I did just want to spend a little bit of time on that, because when it comes to creating content videos such as this one, where I sit and express some of my own opinions, I do that because, one, can't help myself, but two, I do it with the intention of calling out and expressing to you my own personal convictions. There are some really big items where I think it is important and necessary that we agree on them as a group, such as, for instance, the recent discussions around knitting and racism and diversity in the Yarny community as a whole, where I think it is incredibly important that we stress that this is a platform that wishes to support makers of colour and support inclusion and diversity, and therefore call out racism and dismissiveness of that overall debate. And so it is important that we agree on those topics, and that the community that builds up around this platform agree to abide by those. But when it comes to more kind of specific opinions or reactions to certain things, I do want to make it clear that when I talk about them here, I'm doing so because these are my personal convictions, and I think it's important that you know what my convictions are, such that you're able to take it with a pinch of salt, with whatever context you have on your own, and make your decisions accordingly. I'm not sitting here expecting you to blindly and blithely follow everything that it is that I say, because that would be terrifying for more than just you, certainly for me. I appreciate that I am occasionally responsible for the odd yarny indiscretion, and that you take my name in vain for that. That I'm on board with, that I'm fine with. But anything more than that, and I genuinely, I sit here, and so when I talk about things like my personal reaction to drops, when I talk about the fact that for me, having gone through some of the content there, having heard anecdotal evidence of it previously, it's something that I feel sufficiently strongly about to want to call out, not so that you will instantly go, well, that's it, I forswear them forever, but rather that you can put it into your own personal context and make a decision that is right for you. Similarly, when it comes to Madeline Tosh, and as I've mentioned a couple of times now, the way that they responded to the recent discussions around racism and diversity, I'm not going to rehash over old ground. I've mentioned it a couple of times here on the podcast, but I found their response, the way that they reacted to it, to be a little bit problematic, and so I have made a conscious decision that I'm not going to be purchasing yarn from them going forward, at least for the foreseeable future. Now, that is not a decision that I'm going to set in stone. It may well change, their position may change, my position may change, but at the moment that is kind of where I stand on it. And I need to say that as someone who has a metric shit ton of Madeleine Tosh in her stash at the moment, as well as being someone who has repeatedly talked about them, having made purchases from them during the lifespan of the podcast itself. I wouldn't feel comfortable sitting in front of you and not explaining my rationale behind it, but that doesn't mean that I'm expecting you to do exactly the same, or indeed anything similar. Because let's face it, there are a huge number of choices that we can make in purchasing from within this community, and I appreciate that those choices, while huge in number, can be much narrower for some people than others. So if you are perhaps already financially stretched and your budget doesn't allow you to purchase yarn in quite the flagrant way that some of the rest of us do, I absolutely appreciate that, and therefore the choices that you make, the sort of spectrum of opportunity or the range of options that you have is potentially going to be narrower. And so I appreciate that there are some personal convictions that I may have that you may not share, because actually the choices that you have to make, or the priorities that you have, are going to be different, and I would never ever seek to judge you for that. I want to make that abundantly clear. As someone who is coming from a different perspective, coming from a place of significant privilege, as we have talked about in the past, I have the privilege of being able to make more circumspect decisions around some of these things, and be able to choose who I want to support when it comes to spending that money. And it's something I do think about quite a lot. It's something that the recent discussions have brought home to me even more, and so I do intend to be a little bit more circumspect with that going forwards. But hopefully you understand and appreciate that that's not me trying to make an explicit kind of or implicit requirement on you to do the same, and I'm just seeking to inform you of my own perspective, as opposed to place any responsibility or degree of expectation on you and your own. Because I do think it would be kind of remiss of me to not mention something or tell you something or talk to you about a thought process that I've had, if it gives you additional context and information to help you make some decisions. I mean, I don't know everything. I'm not the fucking oracle. By a long stretch. I mean, I am assuming you don't come here for, you know, kind of knitting wisdom and advanced techniques through kind of YouTube osmosis. That is very much not not my bag and not why I'm here. I'm assuming you come here perhaps more for the you know, kind of occasional nitty ramblings and chat, the incredibly few and far between projects that we happen to have going, the beautiful stash wall, and perhaps just some general Sweary loquaciousness. I mean, I hope that's why you come, because God knows what else you're getting out of this. It has gone incredibly dark here all of a sudden, and again is windy and rainy, so if you can hear the atmospheric weather in the background, I do apologise for that. But yeah, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time picking up on a couple of comments, both on last week's episode and a couple before. I'd heard a few people kind of coming and questioning some of my thoughts around the Madeleine Tosh piece, around the drops piece, and again, this is my personal opinion. You don't have to do anything with it. I have to live with it. I have to make sure that I am comfortable in sharing my own personal convictions with you. Do with it what you will. And so let's move along now into vicarious knitting. And my vicarious knitting has also kind of been focused on my whip this week, because I want to be working in it. I want to get this fucker done. Partly so I can wear it at EYF, and partly because I'm very conscious that 2 FOs in what we're on, like 10 weeks, 11 weeks, is pitiful, and I need to pull my finger out. So, you know, I'm trying to crank that up a little bit now. But in terms of vicarious knitting and other things that I've been thinking about, obviously with EYF just around the corner, I've been starting to do a little bit of thinking around some of the booths that I might want to hit up. I'll confess to not having gone full kind of like deep dive research into it just yet. And in terms of patterns, there's only really one pattern that I think I'm definitely shopping for. The pattern in question is the Fukuro sweater by Whitney Hayward, and I'm going to put it up here on the screen so you can see it. I've shared this previously in one of the monthly Vicarious knitting posts that I open up, the new topics that I open at the start of every month for us to talk at length about all of the things that we'd love to be working on, whether or not time allows. And I've mentioned this over there once before. It really is a sweater that's sticking with me. Now, there's a couple of people who've modified it to include full length or 3/4 length sleeves. That's definitely what I would choose to do here, but there is something about this sweater that looks so wearable. It very much speaks to my aesthetic. It would fit brilliantly in with my work wardrobe as well. I love the colours the original sample is knit in. It ticks a lot of the boxes for me, and so I will definitely be on the lookout for yarn for that at UIF, and I'm hoping that given there's going to be quite a strong mix of different types of yarn, perhaps something that is a little bit more, it's not a sort of rustic wool that this is knit with, it's knit with stone wool. I think it's their Romney, which is a sort of DK weight, slightly kind of more woolly wool than standard superwash merino, and it's definitely got a slight texture to it which makes it really interesting. It's like heatheredness to it. So that will be a nice one for me to look out for when I am there. But otherwise, I'm just looking forward to having a bit of a wander. I know obviously Labiana May is going to be there and is going to be back, and she's been sharing some of her incredible colours over on Instagram. Similarly, there is Woolly Mammoth, is someone whose yarns I've been looking to try and squish for a while, and a lot of others besides. So I'm quite looking forward to having a bit of a wander around there. As ever, I'm not going with any specific plans, barring perhaps the Fukuro pullover. I think I'm just going to go have a bit of a wander and see how I get on, but I'm not intending to go too mad. Certainly this isn't going to be like Rhinebeck level of crazy. Let's draw a bit of a line under that one. But elsewhere in the group, you have also been calling out some fabulous patterns that you're looking to knit vicariously as well. The first of those that caught my eye this week, and these are all from the Ravelry thread where we have our Show Us Your Vicarious March knits. The first of those is a pattern called Twist of Fade, and this is a gorgeous drop shoulder sweater. It is knit from the bottom up, but it is another faded sweater. It is by a designer called Andrea Yetman, who isn't a designer I'd heard of before, but I really, really like the shape of this sweater. And as someone who, I do enjoy a slightly boxier knit, I love a drop shoulder. It does mean that I have to get over my thing about knitting sweaters bottom up. I do appreciate that. But it's a sweater shape that's really quite wearable for me. I have a few of them in my wardrobe already, and so I think it was TabbyCat82 who mentioned this. A big thank you for that, because yeah, it's a really nice, simple, straightforward sweater. It's a DK weight fade, which frankly there are not enough of in my humble opinion, and yeah, thank you for calling this one out because I think it's gorgeous. Another knit that caught my eye is actually a work in progress, and it's a sweater pattern that I think I'd glimpsed, but I hadn't really appreciated its beauty. Now, I mentioned earlier on when I was talking about my featherweight cardigan that it can be quite difficult to showcase some of the lovely speckled sock yarns or kind of beautiful indie dyed colourways that we see, and one pattern that does that brilliantly is the Gaudi sweater by Julie Knits in Paris, and this was mentioned and shown off by Juadilia over in the Ravelry thread as well, and she has a work in progress version that she was sharing there, and I don't think I'd really appreciated how beautiful this sweater is. So it has a large colourwork yoke section that is obviously designed to make it look like stained glass windows. I'm not a Gaudi expert in terms of his architectural style. I have not yet seen his cathedral. It is on my list of things to see. But it's a beautiful design, and I think having had a look through some of the finished objects where you can see people have really gone to town on the colourwork section and the colours that they're using there, yeah, this was really inspiring to see. And so definitely, again, as someone who is working on a yoked sweater at the moment, something that I would consider working on in the future. So thank you very, very much for calling that one out too. My fabulous friend and our Ravelry moderator and chief pickle, Y Malcolm, who is Yelena, had also called out a pattern that I hadn't seen before. This is Razor. It is a fabulous v-neck sweater that I'll put up here on the screen, and that is designed by Stephanie Earp, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. Apologies if I have butchered that. It is a fabulous deep v-neck sweater. It's got slightly kind of batwing sleeves, which is gorgeous. It's v-neck both front and back, which makes it very stylish. And one of the recommended yarn choices here is the Harrisville Nightshades yarn. Nightshades is a beautiful yarn that I got the opportunity to squish in person at Rhinebeck last year. It's by Harrisville, who obviously are a wonderful New England based yarn manufacturer. And while I didn't buy any nightshades, I know of more than 1 or 2 people who did. I also know that Isolde has started stocking it in her store here in the UK, and I'm expecting to see a little bit of it over at UIF later this week, so I may end up filling the void that was left in my stash. No nightshades, pun intended. And so yeah, this is a gorgeous sweater, and I can see Yelena pulling it off rather delightfully as well. And then last but not least was Ninja Goddess, who drew my attention back to a pattern that I'd posted previously as well. And this is a fabulous shawl pattern by the wonder that is Isabel Kramer, and it is her Cowboys and Angels shawl. This is a DK weight shawl. I mean, obviously I was drawn to the colour. Let's make no bones about it. But it's a beautiful, beautiful shawl. It's DK weight. It will be fabulously warm and cozy. It's huge. It does take 4 skeins of DK, which means it is going to be a, you know, an endeavour to knit. But that being said, I can imagine this being so delightfully cozy and squishy, and the texture on it is just beautiful. So thank you very much, Ninja Goddess, for bringing that to my eye again. Yeah, I do. I have a lot of love for a DK weight shawl, and this is a particularly excellent example, so thank you for that. And that's about it for this week. I'm conscious it has been a much shorter episode than normal, and I do apologise for that. As I say, my monogamous tendencies and variations thereof notwithstanding, I have had head down this week, been trying to get a little bit done. Motorbike, sorry about that. But yeah, just trying to work through the projects that I really want to get off the needles in advance of EYF, in the vain hope that I might have something done and sharing with you a finished object before too much longer. But yes, as I have mentioned, if you are coming to EYF, it would be a delight to see you there. I hope you have a wonderful time. If you're not coming to EYF, I hope you don't mind me blethering on about it for a little bit longer, and I hope too that you're able to take advantage of our EYF giveaway over in the Ravelry thread. I'd love to be able to offer you the chance of winning a few goodies from there, so you can appreciate it all, albeit at a bit of a distance. But yes, as ever, show notes can be found in the Ravelry group, which is the Knitting Vicariously podcast group over on Ravelry. Similarly, you can also find all of the Instagram links and hashtags for this week's episode over in the Knitting Vicariously Instagram account on Instagram. Shall we say it one more time? No. But yes, again, thank you so much for bearing with me. I'm conscious that knitting wise there isn't much to show, but it's been lovely to check in with you all the same. And yes, it only really remains for me to wish you a very wonderful rest of day, rest of week. I hope your knitting is keeping you happy and fulfilled, and if for whatever reason it isn't, I hope you have the chance to knit vicariously. Keep on keeping on, and I will see you again very soon. Bye. It's not really something that fits into my wardrobe particularly, and I do think that is really rude. We done? Shouty, it's linked to that, so yes. And now it's hailing outside, because I hesitated to mention earlier that it was looking spring-like. Good. Helpful. Thanks. Oh, crumbs. there's so much fussing. There's so much hair fussing that's going on. See this side we're fine because it's doing its thing. This side, this is what happens when you sleep on curls and you have naturally straight hair, but they have been hairsprayed into oblivion. It's very blonde. Not sure how I'm feeling about it. Like, if it was all just this, we'd kind of be okay, because this is not too far removed from where I've been in the past. It's the very blonde section here that I think I'm just a little bit concerned about, but it's fine. It's only hair. It's fine. You know when Kristen from Bullenbein dressed up as Mauve? I mean, one, it was fucking hilarious, and two, she looked stunning. But what I appear to have done is taken that one step further and gone, I will actually become gold and blue. I mean really.